Hello, and welcome to Agri Summit 2021. The Canada-Africa Agriculture Summit focused on harnessing possibilities across the value chain. My name is Sherry Lee, Director of Partnerships and Public Affairs with the Economic Innovation Institute for Africa. The timing for crucial conversations on advancing Canada-Africa commercial relations, particularly in the agriculture sector, has never been more important. To make major advances, key players across the entire value chain must be at the table. To that end, the Sprott Center for African Research and Business at Carleton University, the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University, the Economic Innovation Institute for Africa, the Institute for Canada, Africa and Business and Policy Research, and our numerous partners are very excited to host a number of engaging international speakers and thought leaders during this unique virtual summit. These are leaders with impressive accomplishments across government, business, academia, and civil society. We are thankful for their availability and willingness to share insights on contemporary issues in the agriculture space. This event is made possible through the generous support of several organizations, and we'd like to thank the following sponsors, starting with Tourism Saskatchewan. Tourism Saskatchewan provides a one-stop resource for experiencing Saskatchewan's vibrant attractions. It also provides information on growing the province's tourism businesses and recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Tourism Saskatchewan's business support content, advice, training, and resources are all designed to make Saskatchewan businesses more competitive, sustainable, and profitable. Secondly, we'd like to thank Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, which promotes and supports research and training in the humanities and social sciences. We acknowledge their support through the Connection Program. The goal of the Connection Program is to realize the potential of social sciences and humanities research for intellectual, cultural, social, and economic influence by supporting specific activities and tools that facilitate the flow and exchange of research knowledge. On behalf of the organizers and partners, we thank our sponsors. I would now like to introduce keynote speaker, Dr. Fred Olayele's research and practice focus on trade policy, innovation, FDI, urban policy, political economy, and inclusive development. He has published and shared best practices in these areas at numerous conferences and institutions around the world. A distinguished economist and public policy expert, he has consulted widely and advised many public and private organizations in Canada, United States, and Africa. Professor Olayele has held academic positions and taught graduate and undergraduate courses at Carleton University and the University of Regina, both in Canada. He has served as a visiting professor and guest speaker across universities and academic institutions abroad. He's a visiting professor of trade and development at the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria in Spain, and was a visiting scholar at the World Trade Institute in Bern, Switzerland. Prior to academia, Dr. Olayele held several economic policy positions and advised the Canadian provincial governments of British Columbia and Saskatchewan in the FDI, economic development, and energy policy domains. Earlier in his career, he was a global trade finance specialist with Citigroup, International Advisory Board member with the International Economic Development Council in Washington, D.C., Director, Center for African Research and Business, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, and Chief Economist with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. He earned his PhD in economics from Lancaster University, United Kingdom, and his MA in economics from the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. A public intellectual and results-oriented leader, Dr. Olayele serves on various nonprofit boards and supports many social causes. Welcome, Professor Olayele, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and I'm delighted to be here. My talk today is titled Market, Trade, and Inclusive Value Chain Development in the Agricultural Sector. The case for Canada and Africa to deepen their commercial relations is quite compelling. And the importance of the agricultural sector for building resilient and sustainable economies for prosperity cannot be overemphasized. So I couldn't agree more with the title of the summit, which underscores the fact that harnessing the many possibilities across the value chain has never been more important. So my talk today is really focused on the complementarities that exist between Canada and Africa. It is about creating win-win outcomes in both jurisdictions. For context, agriculture remains the mainstay of most economies across Africa. It is the dominant economic sector. Farming remains the major source of food and income, while also accounting for about 60% of all jobs on the continent. And the importance of smallholder agriculture for food security and nutrition on the continent is well documented. Most of the citizens are farmers, and those who are not farmers earn a living in the informal subsistence economy. This has major implications in the context of the ongoing structural transformation across economic systems on the continent. In its Feed Africa strategy, the African Development Bank emphasizes the need to support smallholder farmers to achieve profitable agriculture and sustainable food security. The importance of maximizing Africa's shares of a rapidly growing and dynamic agricultural export market cannot be overemphasized. In terms of statistics, while the global population is expected to reach 9.7 billion by 2050, the demand for food is anticipated to increase between 59% and 98% by 2050. This will have a profound impact on global agricultural markets in ways we have not seen before. To put things in perspective, Africa alone is expected to contribute more than half of the 2.4 billion increase in global population by 2050, while the continent's food and beverages subsector is expected to reach $1 trillion in value by 2030. Now, let's talk about Canada for a bit. Canada is a global leader in agriculture with state-of-the-art technologies and innovations that continue to drive prosperity while creating jobs that are helping the competitiveness of the sector, particularly in the agri-food segment. For instance, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Agri program is accelerating the commercialization and adoption of innovative products and technologies that will help increase competitiveness and sustainability in the sector. As we have seen in the last 5 years, protectionist and disruptive trade policies south of the Canadian border somehow validated past concerns about the risks associated with Canada's over-reliance on bilateral trade at the expense of multilateral trade with other regions of the world. So clearly, Canada is taking seriously the need to diversify its trade and consider other emerging markets in Africa, Asia, Latin America. And we have seen several policy initiatives aimed at diversifying Canada's trade towards emerging market economies. The Canadian government's progressive trade agenda is committed to supporting all segments of society in taking advantage of the economic opportunities flowing from trade and investment. To diversify successfully, Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises require a nuanced understanding of where the opportunities lie and how to successfully break into global and regional value chains. This presents a huge opportunity for both Africa and Canada, both commercially and in terms of the global policy and development agenda. Now let's unpack this. Let's unpack this and discuss the implications. Analysis by Brookings shows that the ongoing industrial revolution in Africa will double production to $1 trillion within a decade, with the food processing sector, among others, accounting for 3/4 of the anticipated expansion. Therefore, the ability to grow and access nutritious and sustainable food will be critical in the coming years. It goes without saying that Canada can play a major role in Africa's quest for greater integration into global and regional value chains by deploying its global leadership and expertise in the agriculture industry. As we continue to navigate the ongoing digital transformation, policymakers in both jurisdictions must prioritize investments in agriculture. Therefore, the ability to grow and access nutritious and sustainable food will be critical in the coming years. It goes without saying that Canada can play a major role in Africa's quest for greater integration into regional and global value chains by deploying its global leadership and expertise in the agriculture industry. As we continue to navigate the ongoing digital transformation, policymakers in both jurisdictions must prioritize investment in agriculture. Agriculture remains crucial to development in Africa, and there are many policy frameworks that help to define what the issues are and what must be done to move the needle. Let's talk about policy frameworks a little bit. In Maputo, Mozambique in 2003, during the African Union Summit, a declaration was made and the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, CADP, became Africa's policy framework for agricultural transformation, wealth creation, food security, nutrition, economic growth, and prosperity for all. At the African Union Summit in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea in June 2014, heads of state and government adopted the Malabo Declaration on accelerated agricultural growth and transformation for shared prosperity and improved livelihoods. All in all, untapped agricultural potential continues to undermine food security and development on the continent. Estimates from the African Development Bank show that the number of undernourished people in Africa is projected to increase to 320 million by 2025. About 200 million hectares of land, which represents about 50% of the world's uncultivated land, is on the continent. But the issue is that agriculture continues to suffer a setback due to low productivity, infrastructure deficit, access to markets and financing. That is really what I want to speak to today. How can we build capacity and create pathways for players in the sector to earn higher incomes and transition into the formal economy? Innovation is key. Research shows that productivity improvements happen fast in firms and industries with significant digital processes, while most of the time, segments of the real economy in agriculture and manufacturing are slow, with little or no productivity gains. This is an area Africa must focus on. And it goes without saying that innovation is fundamental to moving the needle here. This is where the relationship between Canada and Africa could generate the most significant impact. That is not to say that Canada has answers to everything, but the point here is that it is a global leader in the space, in the context of innovation and technology, and Africa has the potential to feed the world. And as you may expect, we cannot discuss trade and market integration in Africa without doing so in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, what many in the policy arena call the most significant and consequential policy development on the continent in contemporary times. And let me quickly break it down so we know what the AFCFTA means for getting it right in a critical sector like agriculture. Estimates from the World Bank show that the trade agreement will lift 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty, boost the incomes of 68 million others who live on less than $5.50 a day, achieve an incremental continent-wide gain in income of $450 billion. That's about 7% by the year 2035, while adding $76 billion to the income of the rest of the world. Other economic impacts include an increase in exports by $560 billion, and mostly in sectors with high multipliers, like manufacturing. That's more than the GDP of Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Burkina Faso, and Mali combined. So think about that in the context of the food processing sector and the entire value chain. As well, it is important to think about these things from the perspectives of equity and inclusion. And I'm talking about inclusive job creation here. That trade, the same World Bank analysis shows that this trade agreement will generate larger wage gains for women than for men. That's another major indicator of inclusivity. Gender remains an important factor in land use decision making and the entire agricultural value chain. The nuances of development interventions have major implications for participation and interaction, particularly by women in the value chains. This underscores the importance of ensuring such interventions are optimized to ensure sustainable poverty alleviation, social inclusion, food security, and gender equitable results. Let's look at the venture capital and entrepreneurial ecosystem in Africa. This will provide some context for Canadian entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized enterprises operating in the agri-food space. In the last couple of years, investor interest in the fintech sector in Africa has grown exponentially. The influx of foreign private capital, particularly from the US, has hit unprecedented levels. Foreign investors are flocking to take advantage of the continent's fast-growing fintech ecosystem. As these investments pour in, these companies are expanding both across the continent and into new services. With multiple large fundraisers and exits, we have been seeing upward trends recorded across talent, capital, market, and exit. You may say that the regional entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystems in Wall Street and Silicon Valley are driving much of this growth. And that would be correct. But here is the question. Given Canada's global leadership and expertise in the agri-food sector, with a $56 billion agriculture and agri-food product export industry, what is stopping Canada from replicating what America is doing in Africa's fintech sector in the agri-food space? Africa is a site of enormous economic potential, and agriculture is one of them. Unlocking the potential of agriculture remains key for development, but farmers on the continent are held back by too many things: inadequate funding, market fragmentation, and low productivity. The pace of digitization is changing things rapidly. I talked about the AFCFTA. That's another significant development. So all in all, Canada can and should prioritize agribusiness and food processing linkages in the context of adding value for these markets. And a fundamental thing to look at here is the informal sector. The informal sector is very key for unlocking value. Canadian firms looking to win market share in the agricultural sector in Africa must approach it with a problem-solving mindset. And again, the secret here is the informal sector, which remains the backbone of Africa's economy, accounting for over 80% of employment. And in case you are wondering, the World Bank estimates that agricultural investments generate 4 times greater poverty reduction than other sectors. Let me repeat that statistic. The World Bank tells us that agricultural investments generate 4 times greater poverty reduction compared to other sectors. Why? Because financing in the sector enables poor farmers to increase their wealth and food production. This makes the underground economy critical for absorbing most of the expanding labor force. This has implications for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economic growth. So this is about looking for the hidden opportunity. Look, let me bring a little bit of economic theory into this. In his 1958 book on economic development, Albert Hirschman talked about unbalanced growth theory in the context of how marginalization and economic exclusion tend to foster participation in the informal economy. He famously argued that development depends not so much on finding optimal combinations for given resources and factors of production, but instead it should be about calling forth and enlisting for development purposes resources and abilities that are hidden, scattered, or badly utilized. That is key for entrepreneurs that look at these things from a risk-reward paradigm, since the risk-return trade-off is often the most important consideration for private capital. For the countries on the continent, as we all know, the countries on the African continent are diverse in terms of population, development levels, opportunity, stability, and so on. So, to successfully break into these value chains, Canadian firms must understand that Africa is a heterogeneous market that needs market entry strategies that are customized based on prioritized countries and cities of operation. This means Canadian firms need to think about agribusiness in Africa in terms of cities, products, and so on. Again, with the AFCFTA, increased market access is key for competitiveness and economies of scale. This is because regional innovation ecosystems can leverage existing knowledge clusters and the relative strengths of a geographic region to provide incentives for beneficial trade and exchanges. In closing, the digital revolution is fostering interactions between traditional sectors and digital technologies. And we are seeing a new frontier of innovation that is creating multiple pathways to wealth creation in a sustainable manner. And more importantly, SMEs are fully participating in the entire value chain. This is a major advance. Africa is well positioned to provide beneficial partnerships with complementary benefits as Canada shares best practices in its sustainable and vibrant agriculture sector. Thank you so much for listening.